listening to the Retail Razor Show, where your expert hosts and their guests cut through the clatter in retail and retail tech to shape the future of retail.
Hello, Retail Razor Show listeners and viewers, and welcome to retail's favorite podcast for product junkies, commerce technologists, and everyone else in retail and retail tech alike. I'm your host, Casey Golden.
And I'm your host, Ricardo Belmar, and boy, do we have a special treat for you this episode. Today, we are talking about the changing relationships between retailers and brands, the evolution of shopper engagement, how Omnichannel is morphing into seamless stores, and we see how it's possible to transform over 320,000 meeting requests into over 50,000 actual meetings in a span of 3 days. But first, let's talk about our newest crossover event and this episode's special guests.
That's right. After our wildly successful crossover event with This Week in Innovation podcast for our NRF Live mini-series, joined by one of our favorite guest hosts, Jeff Roster, we've done it again for our Shoptalk coverage.
Yes, indeed. By popular demand, and by popular demand, I mean we really liked the idea, so we thought let's do it again. Jeff Roster and I teamed up at Shoptalk for a few special interviews to bring you a Shoptalk Live mini-series.
Well, I'm sad. I once again had to miss this one, but I know you guys have pulled together a killer mini-series not to be missed. Who are the episode's special guests?
I'm glad you asked, Casey. What better way to kick off this mini-series and with a deep dive discussion on all the hot topics at Shoptalk than sitting down with the source, Shoptalk's amazing content team, led by Krystina Gustafson, SVP of Content, and Ben Miller, Director of Original Content.
Krystina and Ben are incredible. You and Jeff really got to dig into all the hot topics. And wasn't this right after they had delivered their retail zeitgeist presentation on the main stage, right?
Yeah, that's right. We recorded this the very next morning after that session where Krystina and Joe Laszlo had run through what Shoptalk was seeing as the major retail trends for the year. Plus, Ben and Krystina gave us some insights into what they found most notable from all the sessions at the show. And did I mention those 50,000 meetings they orchestrated? I mean, just wow, wait until you hear all the stats about what was surely the biggest Shoptalk ever.
Well, let's get to it then and jump right into you and Jeff's conversation with Krystina Gustafson and Ben Miller from Shoptalk, recorded live and in person at the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our special Retail Razor crossover event with This Week in Innovation. I'm Ricardo Belmar, live and in person here at Shoptalk 2023. And I am here with the myth, the legend, Mr. Jeff Roster from This Week in Innovation. How you doing, Jeff?
Really good, Ricardo. I'm so proud of both of us. We're here last day,
right,
literally working the show to the last minute, and that's how
right.
we roll.
That's what we do.
That's what we do.
That's right. And for this special edition episode of our live series here at Shoptalk, we have the incredible pleasure of having two folks from the Shoptalk team to talk to us about the event. We're here with Krystina Gustafson and Ben Miller. Krystina, Ben, how are you doing today?
Doing awesome.
Very good, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Fantastic. So let's jump in, and I think one of the probably maybe not most interesting, but something I'm sure everyone wants to know is just to give us a little bit of data around just how big a Shoptalk was this year.
Yeah, happy to start. 10,000 plus attendees, our largest crowd so far. I would say, though, what I take away even more than the size is just the quality of the attendee. So it really sort of felt like this was the big year. I know last year was technically retail's big reunion, but with the loss of corporate travel bans, people just really being back down to business, the caliber of attendee, the amount of retailers and brands we had attending the show at a very senior level was one of the big takeaways to me beyond just kind of the scale of the event. I know we'll probably talk about Meetup a little bit later, but we also were able to facilitate 50,000 meetings in the course of 2 days, which was incredibly impressive. Other things to note about scale, 275 speakers, 50 hours of content, 80 sessions, 7 content theaters. So I would say those are kind of the high level numbers, but Ben, you might have some additional stats to toss out there.
Yeah, I think about the meetup, 50,000 sounds an incredible number.
Right, yeah, it does.
So we had 323,000 requests.
Wow.
So the appetite.
Unbelievable.
The appetite for everybody to
amazing.
want to get together, to have some meetings, to meet people, to build their business. And you could feel that energy when you walked around. And that energy, it's day 4. We're lagging a little bit, but that energy, that energy is palpable.
Yeah,
that's been a key part of the show this year.
Yeah. Wow. That's on 323,000 requests. Wow. One of the things we were talking about before, what we think is sort of unique about the Shoptalk experience, you have, for example, like how many vendors were here, whether exhibiting or attendees. I think that's always a key part of bringing all parts of the industry together that Shoptalk is so special for.
No, we really agree. I think you've heard Sophie, our president, talk before that we don't think about a buy side and a sell side. We don't try and compartmentalize. We have a community, and our vendors, the technology companies, whether they are really small startups for whom a Series A feels a distant proposition still, right through to Google, Facebook, Meta, some of the biggest organizations and biggest corporations in the country and in the world are here. We have about 700 technology companies and technology vendors, and many of them are on our show floor, exhibiting, showing their wares, hosting their clients, and also being involved in the meetings. And they're a really important part of the community.
And then tell us a little bit about the startup community and the relationship with Shoptalk there.
Yeah, it's, I think, been a part of our community that's been really special from day one. We were really the first show that was putting Krystina Lake on the main stage when she had founded Stitch Fix, the guys at Dollar Shave Club. So I'd say it's always been a core part of who we are, but we have recognized that it's such a differentiator for us that we want to pour more investment into it. And so we've actually been building out our team internally to make sure that we're really cultivating that community, bringing people on board who are specific to, bringing the big VCs to the show, because, hey, when you get the big VCs here, you're also going to be building a big startup community. And I had jotted down the number, which of course is escaping me now. But yes, 475 founders who were at Shoptalk this year. I like to think that number is actually probably a little lower when you think about the fact that some founders have potentially sold their businesses, gone on to corporate ventures. It's probably over 500 higher in some capacity, people who are current founders or have founded businesses before. But we just truly think that's what gives the show so much life. Just the energy that you have from those entrepreneurs who are coming here to learn, share what they're finding. They tend to be also some of the more open folks when they're talking about the challenges that they're facing, which is
not
always
tend
refreshing.
to be 100%. That's why it's so fun to talk to the startup community, because there is no filter.
Yeah.
And there is no AR person to say, don't say that. So no, it's, the difference as an analyst working, with the largest companies in my old days at Gartner to work covering the startup community. It's night and day. It's so refreshing.
Were you, I don't know if you were in the keynote with Imran Khan from Verishop, but he was unfiltered while he was up there on stage, which, we've been getting such good feedback on that interview. So yeah, I hear you.
I think we're incredibly proud about the keynote lineup this year. And it's been an incredible process to work with all of our keynotes to be prepared. But one of the things that we have spoken about is how they can be open. Nobody wants to come to an event and just see someone reading a press release. And some of the great conversations that we've had on the main stage this year, and some of the openness of the speakers has been quite a revelation. I think we're probably the best, group that we put together.
I agree. And I have to say, just being I spent a lot of my time in the depths of the green room at the show. And I have to tell you, the authenticity of those leaders, and I know that sounds really cheesy, and I'm not typically the type of person, Ben knows I'm not the soft, emotive type, but it was palpable. Every single one of them was incredibly kind, incredibly grateful to be here, willing to be open, recognizing that our audience really wanted to learn. And so I didn't even feel to the same degree as Impashas that we had to push. Obviously, we're always pushing to say interesting things, but they were eager to do it, which was really unique and special.
Tell us a bit more about some of the feedback you've had, both in the keynotes and then even in some of the other track sessions. I know there have been some really interesting speakers there. I know I was in some where you could just feel, some of the speakers are just, I would almost have to describe as entertaining. And some of the things they said and the way that the crowd really reacted to them.
Yeah, I think some of the interesting formats that we rolled out have been a lot of fun. So one session that got a ton of great feedback was our rapid fire session. We did 2 of them. One was with investors, which again, kind of getting back to your point about people that can be unfiltered. A lot of laughter coming out of that one. I think one of the questions at the end was, what's your most unpopular opinion today? And just really kind of, you poking and prodding them. So that one was a lot of fun.
I'm stealing that one.
Yeah.
that's going to be my one opinion question.
Right,
Yes, exactly. We gamify it. There's a really loud, obnoxious buzzer when people run out of time. They have their 4 minutes. So that was a hit. And then we also did one on tech investing, which was really fun. It had CB Insights, Ulta Beauty, and Patagonia on it. And I think what was really interesting about that one was you had sort of Ulta that has this huge budget. They're always trying new things. They're always testing and learning. And then you have Patagonia, which is a little bit more conservative, maybe doesn't have that big budget to blow. So just kind of hearing Prama, who's the chief digital officer at Ulta, talking about, oh, yes, we're trying this. Yes, we're doing AR. Oh, this is fantastic. And Patagonia just being kind of like, no, hard pass on metaverse, hard pass on this. It really represents the dynamics that our audience has.
Yeah, so different. Yeah.
And I think that authenticity has been something that's thread throughout. And we programmed sessions that were about purpose, about purpose and about sustainability. But actually what we found is, great, we've got the specific sessions, but the general principle of authentic leadership has woven through so many of the conversations. And whether that's, leaders openly facing into some of the challenges that they've had or talking about their views on social issues, there's been some really dynamic conversations, and that's been exciting to be part of.
I think to your question too about feedback, though, I haven't had anyone complain to me yet. So that to me
that's
is
something. That's something, yeah.
That's a big barometer of people being happy. So I think just generally kind of going back to where we started the conversation, everyone's grinning ear to ear, having a fantastic time. And that's not really something that's measurable. We'll get sort of the more measurable data after the show. But it's, so far, I think the buzz has been really great. I do really look forward to getting that feedback, though. One of the things that I had mentioned for anyone who was in the opening remarks session when we talked about how we were doing more on seamless stores this year, that was feedback that we got from both Shoptalk and the most recent grocery shop, was that people wanted to see us lean more into physical stores. And so we did that. We made sure that it was covered on our keynote stage with Foot Locker, with Brilliant Earth. It was something that we dialed up in our track sessions as well. So it's great to hear kind of the initial buzz and excitement, but we also try to take that constructive feedback post-show when we're getting more concrete data, survey results, and then action that for the next show.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more on that topic of seamless stores, because I noticed that difference as well, right? From both from last Shop Talk and progressing through Grocery Shop, to hear that there was more emphasis on what's happening in physical stores and how that ties back into the rest of the retail organization. So tell us more about that.
So I woke up this morning to a notification on my phone, flicking through, half jet lag still. And there's this great message that somebody had posted on my LinkedIn saying, "Thank you, Shoptalk 2023, for finally killing Omnichannel." And
I saw that post.
Do you know what? We've now reached that point where we talk about seamless stores, we talk about unified commerce, the general principle of how do we help customers wherever they are, whenever they want to interact with the brand, to be able to discover, be able to explore, to be able to be excited, or to be able to buy. And whether that's on a social media channel, whether that's on the retailer's own assets, whether that's having a fantastic experience when they walk through a store, that's shopping. And I think the number of times I've heard that, there's been very few conversations about channel management. I finally realized that channels are just this artificial construct, and actually what it is it's getting product to people and exciting people about product. And that's been one of the big themes for me for the whole show. When we spent a lot of time talking about it in advance. We've been looking at how do you remove friction from the shopping experience, and places where a bit of friction is good, but also where you want to take out friction. And that's been a really important thought. How do you link some of these things together about the online experience and the offline experience? What are the building blocks? What's the tech stack to enable that? But as a concept, just being product when they want it I think that's been the biggest thing.
One of the cheesy jokes I didn't get into the zeitgeist was, it reminds me of the Nintendo Switch, where you're playing on your handheld and then you plug it into the TV and your game is picked up, exactly where you were in the game progress. You don't have to finish a level. That's how my brain thinks about what unified retail should be going forward. I didn't have room for it, though. We were already 5 minutes over. But in all seriousness, the example that I did share, which was probably more valuable to the audience, was Brilliant Earth, right? You go online, you do an online consultation, you get to the store, hey, here's 5 rings that we picked out for you based off of what you told us online. Like, I think that's kind of how we're thinking about unified these days. It's less about shopping where you want, when you want, and making that a continuous experience, because we didn't want to undermine in our zeitgeist presentation that frictionless isn't hard and it isn't important. But I think where we landed is more companies have solved for that already, right? The amount of companies that have curbside, that have redesigned their store formats, I think that kind of more progressed, if you will. And I think unified is really still in its early stages, seeing what companies like Brilliant Earth are doing. The other speaker who we confirmed was the chief digital officer from Panera. And they recently signed that deal with Amazon One for the biometric scanning in their stores,
Amazon
linking to loyalty programs. That's another great example. And it's a completely different category than fine jewelry, which is what Brilliant Earth is doing. But I feel like those are 2 early examples of where we see this trend heading.
And I was in a different room when the Panera presentation was on, so I missed it. But the social comment and the social feedback on that, we did some work. One of the things that was right back to when Shoptalk was founded, led by Anil and the team, was to sit down and look at where does the VC come from? And if you follow the money, then you start to pick up the trends. And we spend quite a bit of time looking at this whole idea of, okay, if Shoptalk wants to talk about physical stores, well, what's relevant? What's new? What's the future in that? So, with our friends at CB Insights, we went into the data, and the phenomenal amount of funding is continuing to go into removing friction, whether that's checkout free, for example. This whole idea of connecting that shopping journey, there's funding there, but it's still lower. But we really see that increasing, and there are some of the stats about the levels of it huge. So we believe that's only going to get more, and that's only going to snowball. So understanding that further, pulling out great examples. We talked on the main stage about Zara and some of the work that they're doing in their flagship stores. Zara is certainly the biggest apparel retailer in Europe, not parent company Inditex, one of the biggest in the world. They're still only doing it in a couple of trial stores. So the potential is absolutely huge, and we want to celebrate trials like that.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's music in my ears. Yeah. I mean, I've been fighting Omnichannel forever. No offense, but when your competitor coins the term, no Gartner analyst should ever use that term. What's funny, the funniest thing I ever had is somebody one time, no offense to the vendors in the room, but a vendor one time asked me, "Hey, do you have omnichannel IT spend?" And I said, "Well, I do, but you have to define what you mean." And the conversation went dead. He had no idea what he was looking for.
I absolutely love that. My favorite thing is when people apply to speak at Shoptalk and we're like, "What do you want to speak about?" And they're like, "Oh, omnichannel." Or, "Oh, I want to talk about e-com." And I'm just like, "Give me more.
Okay,
give me more."
Right. Could you be a little more vague? Yeah. So one thing I noticed in particular this time, which I haven't seen at other shows as much attention, and I think maybe it sort of comes out, I think, a little bit out of the seamless stores, but I think, Krystina, you or Joe mentioned it in this session, that there's this renewed focus on how we're enabling store teams, whether it's directly with technology or just with by changing the processes, but just how they're able to work, and how even if you didn't have a session that was stated on the agenda, that's what it was about, I heard that come up from so many presenters and speakers, that part of what they were doing was tying back into how they're supporting those store teams to make their job better. And I think I lost track, but maybe 3 or 4 times I heard one of the speakers mention how they see that as something that is enabling a better career path for these retail workers. And I thought that was super interesting to me because I haven't seen that at other shows or in other events.
I mean, let me give a big picture view, and I'll pass over to Krystina for a bit more detail. I would say take one step back from that. And the first step back from that is the investment environment that we find ourselves in right now. And the decisions and the hard decisions that we make. So if we are going through continued elevated levels of e-commerce sales, we're going through a store renaissance, I think you referred to it, and we need to try and deliver customers, commerce everywhere. Well, that's great, but all of those require investment. So how do you do it in an investment environment which is tighter? And this has felt a really optimistic few days, but we are pretty cognizant of the environment that we're in. The number of speakers that I've heard say in that environment, the 2 things that they focus on now are people and talent, and also the store infrastructure. If you take that together and you think, okay, well, where's the investment in people in stores? Then you start to realize that actually you've got a really cost-effective way to be able to drive digital transformation and to drive significant improvement. So we deliberately programmed some areas where we wanted to talk about some of the detail about that. But actually as a theme, completely agree with Ricardo, it's cropped up in so many different places.
Yeah, I would build on that. I think it's not only the store associates, right? I think people overall ended up being a much bigger theme than we had intended it to be. Yeah. To Ben's point, we did have a couple of sessions that were very specific to store employees, whether it was from the retailer brand side, whether it was from the tech side. We had a couple sessions, maybe 1 or 2 on culture and leadership, but that theme came up, I feel, even more than usual. And I think it's this whole idea of empathy, kind of going back to your point too, and how you leverage your workers. Leverage is probably a crass word, but empower your workers.
There you go.
That sounds much better.
It was really interesting because I feel like the dialogue around store associates for so long has been about productivity. And of course, we were hearing quite a bit of that. The lens of safety seemed to be a new conversation, right? As much as we hear about automation and the reassurances that, the robots aren't going to take your jobs.
Right.
Now it was sort
Right.
of, listening into Amazon. Okay, well, we're actually using automation to make the warehouse workers safer and to make sure that we have, safety protocols in place. And that was kind of a new spin on that theme that I hadn't previously heard and wasn't necessarily expecting coming into the show.
I'm trying to find a stat, and here we go. I got it. There was a great session from Katie Reeves, who's the managing director of COS, as part of the H&M group, managing director of COS in North America, and she talked about the investment that they are making in their smart store portfolio.
Yeah. Yep. I remember that session. Yeah.
One of the key components of the smart store was enabling their teams in the store, and they talked about they're using the app for process improvement, bring all the information into the right place to help them operationally as well as help serve customers better. And she shared that in the pilot stores where they are running, their staff tension of in-store teams has increased by 4%. And if you think about the labour market we're in, Joe shared on the main stage, the quit rate is over 40% higher for retail than it is for this economy as a whole. It's harder to find people, more expensive. If you're able to make that sort of change, enable that by technology, that's incredible. Yeah. Not only that, she shared that because of the process improvements, their stores having an extra 2.5 hours a week to be able to serve their customers better. And that's transformational for a retailer.
Yeah, that's a massive difference. That's a massive improvement. Yeah.
One thing that comes to mind as you're saying that, and it sort of circles back to what we were talking about before, I was in the session with Chobani, and they were actually taking this from more of a purpose perspective. And, she was saying we get asked the question all the time, how do you measure the impact on sales? How do you measure the impact on the business? And she was actually making the point, we see the most measurable statistics in our employee acquisition and retention because there are so many people that want to be a part of a company that is mission driven. So I think it's always such a good point. Technology is really enabling workers. It's, boosting retention. It's helping that labor shortage, but also a really strong purpose and something that has nothing to do with technology could also be really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, how novel. People want to be part of something big. I mean, shocking.
Shocking, right?
We lose sight of it though, don't we?
Well, we do. And, and that was such a strong point. And I was sitting here thinking as you're talking, of course, our good friend, Ron Thurston, is this like his legacy?
Yeah.
Because 4 years ago, we weren't really talking about this stuff. And then Ron pops on and does that amazing podcast and that amazing journey. And now all of a sudden it's like we all are able to say what's common sense.
Yeah.
It's a people business. You better put your people in front of your people business.
Yeah. I even think, the biggest change I've noticed, to your point, if you go back 5 years, no one used the phrases enabling store teams. No one talked about empowering them with the right technology. What everyone said is, well, we have to get them the right training.
Yeah.
And it was all about training was always the key word, and it was investment in training, as if, the only thing you needed to do was to impart a set of skills to just work the store. And now that's completely transformed that it is. I think, you have the right words, Krystina, right? It's about enabling and empowering those teams with the right elements, whether it's process, technology, or the people skills itself, whatever it is. And I can't remember which session it was, but the one that's also stood out to me, someone was talking about how they recognize that when they look across all of the store associates they have, people have different skills and different talents, and some are better than others at certain roles in the store. And that it doesn't make sense to assume that every store employee should be able to do every single job in the store. And especially if you start layering in things now like live streaming, for example. And this was one that I keyed in on because you may remember this, Chip, because some time ago on the podcast, we talked about this idea, and I had, and some other conversation I had with Retail Wire, I think. We talked about this idea that the retailers have this inherent talent in some of their employees because, let's face it, if you go by just by age demographics alone, odds are in most retailers you have employees in stores who may have their own YouTube channel already, independent of that job function, and they're good at this and they like doing it. So it makes sense for a retailer to kind of take advantage of that in a sense, right? And encourage those skills. But at the same time, that same person who might like to live stream, they might not be a good stylist, for example, if it's an apparel store. And there may be another employee that loves to do styling with customers and is so much better at it than others. So give them that kind of growth path using those skills.
And this speaks to something that's at the very heart of Shoptalk content, which is how is technology enabling a lot of this transformation? And if you talk about enabling and empowering frontline workers, you've got 100%, there is the talent. How do you unlock this
Right.
talent.
Right.
And things like live stream, shoppable video create a new way for frontline workers to be able to unlock that talent that they've had in that store, and they've probably been helping a small number of customers with, but now you can do it on a bigger scale. The second's in training. It's really hard to take a whole day out of the frontline worker away from their store to help them with some of the, at times, softer skills to be able to do that. But there's some amazing trials. I mean, Kroger on the front foot about doing incredible work, help empower with app-enabled, short, quick, accessible training, help be able to improve and to deliver a better experience for their guests. And then finally, there's that element you talked about playing to strengths. There is this group of workers in flexible environment, economy, and tech is enabling access that, but actually more broadly enabling existing work that flexibility to choose which store they want to work, what tasks they want to pick up, working at times that their family. So tech is enabling all these things to take that workforce, drive the attention, drive the engagement, and ultimately serve their customers better.
Yep.
I'm laughing because it's a little bit of a tangent, but as you're talking about this and we're just kind of on this theme about empowering your workers and thinking about building technology for the people who are running the organization, I think about maybe another industry, maybe the airline industry that didn't focus on this and somewhat imploded. And so I laugh because we always tell people, if you tell me you're a data-driven, consumer-centric company, get off the stage, because everyone else, like every single company who's on our stages, if you're not, get out of here. But I do think sometimes by saying that, and it's obviously the right approach, we ignore what needs to happen for the employees to make this whole business run. And we've seen very clearly what can happen when that gets ignored. So I think, you know, even just kind of looking to lessons from other industries made us realize just kind of how important this theme is overall as well.
Ricardo, there was a question that actually I wanted to ask you. One of the conversations, because we started to touch about data, and you've got such incredible knowledge in this space. We've picked a conversation almost, a number of speakers have almost thrown their hands and said, you know what, data, trying to understand the customer across all touch points, just can't, first party, third party, I can't get an omnichannel, a true of my customer everywhere. And that's fine, I'm just going to have to serve them where you can. Is that a view you recognize?
I think kind of maybe I would kind of break that down to say that every retailer I talk to will say, you know, at the end of the day, we are overwhelmed with data. There's no lack of data. It's really a matter of, what can I do with that data? How can I actually analyze it in a way that tells me the story about my customer and who they are, what their preferences are, how they want to engage with us? That's what every retailer wants to know. And I think the challenge really is, I forget what the statistic is, but the amount of data that retail generates every day is just overwhelming. I think it's something on the order of, it's more data than the internet generated 5 years ago or something unbelievable like that. And so the question every retailer has to ask is, so what am I going to do with this now, right? What are the tools I have to use? And even if you have the tools, it's not enough, right? Because even that needs to be looked at by people to interpret, what do I do now that I have this knowledge? If I convert that data into something useful and knowledgeable that gives me a possible actions to take, someone has to take those actions. Someone has to make the decision which is the best action. And then it becomes back to a people problem. And I think even today, but in past years, I've seen retailers will say, you know, now we think we know how to select the right tools to help us with the analysis, but now my challenge is, this is so new, we don't have anyone on staff that knows how to deal with this. And if I try to go out and hire those people, everyone wants to hire those people. So it's incredibly competitive. And I feel like I don't even know if we can afford those people to be part of our organization because it's so competitive.
We're back to people.
Exactly, right? Exactly. It always seems to come back to that. You know, I guess what I'll maybe turn around, because sort of the one thing we haven't talked about that has come up all over the place is everyone's favorite new hyped up technology is generative AI. It's like last year's metaverse. And one of the promises, I guess I'll use that strong word about this, is that it is supposed to help with this problem and give you better tools and better decision-making capability with all that data that you have. I'm wondering, what are your, for both of you, what are your thoughts? Because obviously, everyone must be coming up to you and saying, oh, where's the session that we're going to talk about generative AI?
Every session, no.
Yeah.
I was actually surprised. People were more measured than I expected them to be. I thought it was going to be like Metaverse last year, where it was like, the session is not about Metaverse and it still snuck in. I feel like generative AI was a little bit more measured. Look, I think our big thesis on it is again, still very early. What feels different to us, though, is that this feels immediately applicable, and it feels like something that you invest in and see real business results on. So many opportunities. I think, who was it? Sean Downey from Google was just kind of talking about the various use cases for it, whether it's advertising, whether it's, looking at supply chain data, whether it's creatives, whether it's customer service. Right. We had a slide that was kind of making fun of, in a good way, the CB Insights market map that they built with just all and it was just scrolling, right? Yeah. I mean, it's not even retail, right? It's every single industry. The use cases feel endless, which I think is a really exciting opportunity. I think we would both agree that a lot of work still needs to be done to make sure this is ethical, to make sure it's accurate. We're very early stages, but I think it just feels more real to me than the metaverse.
Well, the thing that's real about it is we all are playing on it in our own search engine.
That's right. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, the Microsoft guys we talked to yesterday, just how many more hits on Bing has gotten in the last that's all I've used.
Yeah, it is like 150 million extra users every day.
Exactly. It has to be. And so literally, there's no technology that every single person is using that it has this immediate impact in the business. I mean, we all didn't pick up point of sale devices, or all didn't pick up whatever, but this one thing hit. But we were tracking it from a startup perspective. I mean, the amount of spend in AI even 2, 3, 4 years ago, it's orders of magnitude compared to everything else. And then it just exploded.
Yeah, it's just in the last.
And then it got a little controversial. So then people even used it more, and everyone's trying to trick it and all this stuff. And,
it kind of became a game.
But I think you hit on something really important there, right? One of the biggest problems with the metaverse conversation, and we were very clear about this last year as well, the learning curve.
Yeah.
To even understand what it is, to understand what blockchain is.
Right.
Is
How do I
virtual
use
gaming actually the metaverse? What is it? Goggles, ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Like my parents can go on the website, type it. It is so easily accessible and it's so easily understandable. And I think that's why you've seen just meteoric rise in interest compared to the metaverse.
And the other thing is, if you break it down, there is 3 potential areas that generative AI can help with, which are the mental challenges. Number 1, can I make repetitive tasks more efficient? And scale retail is the efficiency of process.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
It's about scale, right? It's about scaling.
Great. This is something that can help it. So, of course, retail is going to lean in. The second is, can it help drive commerce everywhere? We started the conversation with seamless stores.
Right.
The amount of copy and creative that would be required to be wherever your customer be is mind-boggling. Generative AI might be able to help. And thirdly, that the holy grail of mass retail, physical, of personalization. We've talked about it every time. And the reason we talk about it every single conference is because we haven't cracked it yet.
Right. That's right.
Generative AI has the potential to be able to help in some of that areas. So there's 3 absolutely core retail drivers that we can see cases for. So no wonder people are excited. On the plus side, we were in the staff room just before we came down, and we brought up ChatGPT, and I asked ChatGPT, what were the key themes from Shoptalk 2023? And of course, he told me that unfortunately it's historic and can't do that. So Krystina pointed out that maybe our jobs are secure for another year yet. So we'll take that.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're spot on that. I mean, I like to I steal a quote from one of my colleagues at Microsoft who tells everyone in every meeting, if I haven't had 5 retailers I talked to today about generative AI, it's only because the 4th retailer didn't get off the phone with me till the end of the day and I couldn't get to the 5th call.
I like that. That's a good one.
And it's so true. And I think you're right about the different categories. I mean, one of our favorite customers that we talk about is CarMax, where they've taken this technology and, they found that one of the pain points in their customer journey is people go to their website and they want to research the cars they have in inventory. And one of the tools, of course, is to look at reviews and comments from people who bought past cars. Well, there are thousands of reviews. So you go on there, and if you want to look at a car, what's your choice is to read 1,000 reviews before you decide what you want to go look at. Or maybe you just give up, or you find some other tool to help you do that research. So they've actually leveraged these tools now to do all of that summarization for you. So you can go to their website now and you give it the parameters that interest you about a car, and their new AI tool just comes back to you with immediately the summarization across all those thousands of reviews. Here are the key points that you're interested in. Here's how it compares in these cars that you chose to look at.
I need this so bad. The joke in our household is whenever we travel, I don't read anything. I see a pretty picture and I'm like, book, and it kills my husband. He is like the one that's reading like hundreds.
He wants
of
to
reviews.
research everything, right?
Oh my God, every single thing. Well, I think the bar's in the wrong place in this hotel, or the room was only this many. Yeah, he's he's on it and I am not. So this will help me be a
There you
better
go.
travel partner.
There you go. So I guess let me shift then to the kind of the last one trending thing I wanted to ask you about, because it's one that it's probably one of my favorites. So over the past year, and Jeff likes to poke fun at me for this quite a bit, I've been really big on retail media networks. He knew I was going this way. And part of the reason why I've been beating the retail media networks drum for so long, because I started talking about it back in, October 2021.
It seemed like 2 decades ago
Yeah.
when you really started.
Yeah. But it's evolved. And I think, again, you guys mentioned this in the session, that really, what does it evolve to? It's become more about retailers looking more like a technology company and offering technology solutions and services to other retailers. And I think that, to me, is just really interesting into how their whole core business is evolving.
I think that Ben will jump out of his skin if he doesn't get to answer this
I
question.
know. Well, and Ben's laughing. So anyone who can't see this, Ben's laughing because he and I have had this conversation exactly before.
I don't think an hour goes by without Ben talking about retail in a very positive way.
Yeah.
But
We're of like minds. We are of like minds.
You did a very good job leaving that to the last question, because otherwise we'd have lost the whole of the podcast.
Anything else if we had started with that? Yes.
Why is it so important? Why do I get so interested about it? Because there's 2 levels. One, I think our friend Andrew Lipsman at Insider says it so well. This is the third wave of digital.
Yep, I absolutely, totally agree.
You see the numbers. Okay. The numbers, let's be honest, the numbers are hugely skewed by investment in search return.
Right.
So, yes, we recognize the prize, but you've got to recognize that skew in it. But when you strip that back, there is a digital marketing channel which has the opportunity to directly access sales investment. And whether retail media is more efficient than other digital marketing channels, or it's just that you can actually prove it, then actually that proof point is really valuable. So it's a phenomenal trend. It's a huge wave. And what's been really exciting in this particular event, and we'll continue the conversation in Europe, in Barcelona as well, is to stand back and say, okay, we all know what we do now. We don't need to do it. A lot of us are doing it. Really, how do we get efficient?
Mm-hmm.
Do I need 600 retail media networks in my portfolio? Where do I spend the money? What's exciting about it is he's coming back to, and I think this is Joe made you in the Zeitgeist, is it's about the basics of advertising. So let's talk again about creative. Let's talk about engagement. Let's talk about generating fun. And this is another channel to enable us to do that. So that's really exciting. The second element of it, which is why it's so important, is that element about changing relationships.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that a retailer is, as well as a buyer, is now a seller to their vendors. And that's not just limited to retail media. We call it collaborative commerce networks, which is the sharing of logistics, for example. And when you add in marketplaces and you see how their suppliers, customers, and with other retailers are changing, how do all of that and drive the margin that's there to be taken at the same time as keeping that laser focus? Because we know that as soon as a retailer loses their laser focus on the customer, then that's a challenge for them. How do you balance those 2 together? And that's still a work in progress. And that's one of the fun conversations that we've been having, and seeing what next, and seeing how retailers map that. If you're a serious retailer of a significant scale, you've got to retail media game. You cannot leave that margin on the table. But how do you do it in a way that keeps focused on the customer? And Target are now calling that out in their earnings reports to say it's at the center of their thinking. And that customer-centric approach to alternative revenue streams is going to be a really interesting trend.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I got to tell you, Ricardo, so I was kidding you about, that being, I spent probably 3.5 hours yesterday about 4 different vendors. And I think I now am only beginning to understand literally how much money we're talking about in retail media. And it's never been, it really was never a focus at the other show in the gold part of the country in January. And it's ever present here.
Yeah.
And you can't, as an analyst that covers the entire landscape, you can't get away with it. But the people that actually built some of this stuff, I talked to.
Right.
And it got the history, and it's like, oh my gosh, we're not talking about something that's been around 100 years. We're talking about something that's really exploded in the last 3 years.
Yes.
Right.
And
absolutely.
It's like, that's what he's been talking about.
Ricardo, I'd be curious your thoughts. One debate that we've kind of been having, and we haven't come up with an answer to it yet. It's just kind of the dynamics of how this plays out in industries outside of grocery, because that's of course been the industry that's adopted it the fastest, but the incestuousness of that industry compared to department stores, apparel, places where companies have the opportunity to be more D2C. Part of me wonders if that's scalable there, where the retailers don't have as much, let's go back to the word leverage, as they do in the grocery industry. Have you thought about that at all?
I have, because you're right. I mean, there is a very unique kind of trade relationship in grocery between grocers and the CPG companies that have all those products. It's a different dynamic than you look at a department store, which is maybe the easiest, I guess, example to kind of look at here, where there's so many third-party apparel products, right? Yes, there's private labels in your department store, but generally people are shopping there because of all the name brands that are available. So what's the, say, equivalent opportunity? I've actually been saying department stores, to me, feels like probably the number one most untapped opportunity for this, because I think department stores, we all say the same things, right? They've sort of lost their luster a little bit, right? People just are shopping less at department stores. But what could department stores do to make this more interesting? I would say one of those is they have to increase the overall experience in the store. And if you think of visual impression as a consumer walking into a department store versus an apparel store where you just see apparel hung on racks, in a department store, I think the merchandising opportunities are much bigger. And if you think about the in-store advertising they can do with digital screens, not the sort where, oh, look, there's a screen hanging on the wall showing a video clip about this designer and their products, not that, right? Because anyone can do that. And that's probably my number one least favorite example that anyone can do. And I've been working with digital signage since more than 10 years. And Jeff is laughing because one of the comments I keep making about retail media is from the early days back in the, maybe early 2010s, when I was marketing digital signage solutions, we talked to retailers about creating this kind of media network for their brand in their stores. And not one retailer ever executed it well. They all never got as far as, let's hang a screen here, let's hang a screen there, and then ask brands to give us content. And I suppose part of the conclusion we had is that you can't ask IT to run that operation. It really needs to be run by marketing. But if you think about what you can do with screen technology now that you couldn't do then, you're not limited by the form factor of a traditional TV monitor type screen. You can have the screen shaped any way you want, and you can have any sort of visual layout for it. And if you do that, then I think that opens up new advertising opportunities for those brands that the department store can work with that feels more, lifestyle oriented. It feels more aspirational for the apparel merchandise that's there that they can build off of and entice customers that when you walk by it, you feel like, oh yeah, if I was wearing that jacket, I could be doing what this person's doing on that video, or I'd be out on the mountain, doing this. And I think that it just creates a different feel. That even if you went to that brand store, they may or may not be doing that, but it's different and it's a different experience. So that's why I think that's an untapped opportunity for department stores. And I think that's where that needs to go. And that's why I think adding the in-store component to retail media is so important right now. I think that's where the real story is going to start to surface in this whole concept.
It's almost like, and I that was really helpful. Thank you for sharing that. But it sounds to me so different than the conversations that we hear about retail media today, right? I know some friends who work for some large CPG companies, and it's more of a conversation of you have to do this, but what you're describing is like a desire to differentiate your brand. It feels like a shift in the why.
Yeah.
And don't you also think, though, that with groceries had slotting fees for forever. And it just sort of seems like that's a logical extension of those co-marketing laws going back and forth, where I don't even know this, but I don't think department stores really have slotting fees because the product is constantly changing. So you have something, but
not in the same way. I mean, you have, a designer like a Ralph Lauren may have an arrangement with the department store based on how much space they get on the floor and is allocated for them as a brand. And then that dictates, what merchandise do they make available to that department store versus a competitive department store that might give them more space and they make different merchandise available to them. It's kind of negotiated that way. Not quite the same as the slotting fees that CPGs do in grocery.
And I think the other thing that's the big driver is the fact, just who was on the exhibit floor, TikTok, and what were they doing? There was at least 3 or 4 live streamers. So the idea that we're all creating content and want to create content.
Yeah.
And that now we're finally getting to the point where retailers are comfortable maybe not having everything be so hyper-produced. I think the best example I have is I just love B&H Photo. And if you don't know what that is, it's the best Photoshop in the world. and super high-end skilled photographers that are selling camera equipment. And my first experience with, I don't know if it's live streaming, it's one-to-one, working with them. I mean, for a camera shop, the video quality was not very high. I mean, it was a little shocking, but it didn't matter because the expertise and the engagement from me sitting in Silicon Valley to Midtown Manhattan, and that experience was amazing. And if retailers just embrace that and let their associates create or do whatever they want and produce all this content to fill up all the screens you're going to see, it's going to be great. What I don't want to see is it become so, so over marketed and just take the soul out of it. Because retail should be passion. I mean, I think my dad back in the 70s, in his butcher shop, I mean, it was all about passion. It was about this and that and engage and up and down and And I think in some ways, as we expanded retail, we've lost that a little bit of passion. And maybe this is an opportunity. Maybe it's a nice thing, post-COVID, is that we've now re-embraced and learned and knew what we missed. And let's just have this retail renaissance, and let's get back to the business of having fun and having people engage in this process that we call retail.
Yeah.
And then all those years you pitched me, with those whole digital signages, now all of a sudden everything's coming together. The infrastructure, the screens, the cheap, the screens, the ability, the equipment we have to create all this content. And we've taught almost everyone, if you have something to say, turn on your phone and shoot something out. Well, when retailers unleash that, holy smokes.
And now we have all these tools coming back to the whole immersive commerce idea. I just gave an example of using fancy screen design, but it could be much more tactile and immersive with all these sensor technologies available. I could pick up a product in a store and that triggers something on some sort of visual environment nearby to give me a different bit of content about it because I interacted with the merchandise, and that we couldn't do that before.
Yeah.
Right. So that's another new approach that can, I think, and again, it's in-store media. And I think that's why that's going to be such an important part of it.
It's just going to be such an insane category. I mean, I almost want to go back to my forecasting days and just start trying to build a model out of that, because it is going to be a massive a massive.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe the last thing to kind of wrap us up here, and we talked a little bit before about just how how Shoptalk is changing itself, and you guys announced a new fall Shoptalk for next year. So, I mean, anything you can share with us about how Shoptalk itself is evolving?
Well, we are taking on new challenges, listening to customer feedback, and just really kind of growing the brand in new and exciting ways. I'll let Ben kind of tell you a little bit about Europe, because that's in 6 weeks' time, which is hard to wrap your head around, but that's going to be really fun. In Barcelona, we've got 175 speakers. I'm stealing all your thunder, but a fantastic lineup that's going to be in Barcelona. And then I think, Ben kind of said it earlier, with just the number of meeting requests that we saw in our platform, we recognize that doing this once a year just isn't quite fulfilling the appetite that people have. And so I think you'll see us lean a lot more heavily into the networking component. I think we have a real differentiator there with the Meetup platform. It's not something that other events in the retail industry have. And so it's a real competitive edge. The fact that it's powered by technology, even if someone tried to do it, there's just feasibly no way to do it manually. And so I think you're going to see us lean really heavily into that. And I think, to your point about getting back to business, we love content. We're the content team. We're always going to talk about how fantastic content is, but the reason people are here is to be part of our community, right? And so the more that we can do to enable that is, I think, really kind of the direction that you'll see us going in the future. And that's kind of the impetus behind the new event.
So it is not at all daunting that we're doing it all again. Just slightly.
We tried to block this out. We're like, let's talk about this after.
Look, it's less than 6 weeks now, 9th to 11th of May in Barcelona, a fabulous, progressive and dynamic city, which is just where we want to be for our brand. And the challenge of how do you drive retail innovation through digital transformation in a tough operating environment is as pertinent in Europe as it is in the US. What you've then got to layer on top of that is 30 plus different countries, e-commerce in different stages of development, very local retailers. So we think the opportunity for Shoptalk is greater than it is here. And the reason for that, got their own domestic, who are trying to crack the same problems as somebody maybe only 200 kilometers away, but they don't have a relationship with, but they don't compete. So the opportunity for collaboration, for cooperation, for learning, immense. So we're really excited about what we're building in Europe, what we're going to build in Barcelona. And the show will open at 11 a.m. on the 9th.
It's happening.
Of
People
May.
keep saying,
Yep.
"Are you guys ready?" We're like, "Well, it's coming."
We
will be,
yeah.
Yeah,
We've got incredible lineup. The European retail and brand community have lent into the event stronger than they ever have done. This is only our second year in Europe, but we've got an incredible lineup, and it will be both from a speaker, but especially from a delegate perspective, the most senior event that we've ever put on. And we are seeing people think, you know what, this is a great way to get our teams together, to bring our individuals from across Europe into a place to learn and be inspired. And we couldn't be more excited to facilitate that. And I can't wait to get into the Spanish sun, because I don't know what you guys are in the heat of Las Vegas, but this has not been what I was expecting when I escaped the London winter. So hopefully the sun will shine.
I'm from California. I'm just glad that the water's not coming down. And it's been a long time since a Californian said, no more water, stop for a while.
That's right. Yep. Well, I guess listening to you, Ben, I'm kind of gonna say we're back to the people element again from what you were saying. So it sounds like super exciting for what's to come in Shoptalk Europe. Fantastic. Well, Krystina, Ben, I want to thank you so much for sitting down and spending all this time with us. It's been a fantastic conversation. I think we've all learned a lot, and congratulations on a really great event again. Once again this year. I think content was fabulous, of course, and just the energy, and like we've been saying now multiple times, it really brought all the people together, and I think that's probably the most important part of it.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it, and thank you for having us.
Thanks again. Well, Jeff, I think that wraps us up.
I think we're done. Another good show.
Another good show.
Wow, that was such a great discussion you guys had with Krystina and Ben. And you covered so much ground. And no surprise, you had to cover generative AI and retail media networks in there too.
Yeah, that's true. There's no escaping the impact of generative AI right now. And yes, it did kind of feel like last year's metaverse. I mean, it was everywhere at the show, in the sessions and everything. But I think there's an important difference that we kind of touched on, that metaverse at last year's Shop Talk was all about experiments, right? Trying to see what consumers would like. How would you transform that into commerce? But with generative AI, the use cases are already out there. They're being implemented with real world results, as we heard in some of the sessions at Shop Talk. Plus, this doesn't really require consumer adoption like the metaverse does. It's more about operations and efficiency so far. And that does include consumer benefits that just don't require the consumer to adopt anything yet.
Yeah. What about the retail media piece? I caught the shout out to Andrew Lipsman, our favorite retail media analyst.
Well, probably another obvious one, right? I did find it telling that Shop Talk picked up on what we've been saying here before, that retail media is just the start of a B2B path for retailers to sell services to other retailers and brands as a high margin way to improve profitability.
We definitely will need to revisit these two topics more in our next season.
Absolutely.
So what's coming next with you and Jeff?
Well, we've got a few super interesting startups that we talked with, and we'll cap off the series with another great discussion coming with a couple of fan favorite guests. Now, I'll just give one hint. It's a follow-up to one of our NRF live conversations.
All right. Well, I think I know who that is. I mean, obviously I know since I know what's on the show, but to our listeners,
we'll just have to wait and see on that one. But now I do want to thank both Krystina and Ben for joining Jeff and me for this discussion. I know it was quite a feat for them to make the time for this on the last day of the show, just a couple of hours before they went on stage to give their official wrap-up presentation. So thank you both so much for joining us.
So with that, Ricardo, it's time for us to wrap up this first episode in our Shop Talk Live mini-series crossover with Jeff Roster and This Week in Innovation. It's a wrap. If you enjoyed our shows this season, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember to smash that subscribe button in your favorite podcast player so you don't miss a minute. Plus, you can watch us, not just listen, on our YouTube channel and like and comment on this season there too. And of course, if you want to know more about what we talked about today, including a full transcript of each episode, take a look at the show notes and handy links for more deets. I'm your co-host, Casey Golden.
If you'd like to connect with us and share your thoughts on this season, follow us on Twitter at KCC Golden and Ricardo_Belmar, or find us on LinkedIn. Be sure and follow the show on Twitter and LinkedIn at Retail Razor for the latest updates. I'm your host, Ricardo Belmar.
Thanks for joining us.
And remember, there's never been a better time to be in retail if you cut through the clutter. Until next time, this is the Retail Razor Show.